My name is Elena Rowan. I'm 32 years old, and I used to believe respect in a relationship was either there or it wasn't. For a long time, I thought I had that with Nathan. We had been together for almost 2.5 years, and from the outside, we looked solid in the kind of way people rarely question. Shared groceries, shared keys, shared habits so small they felt invisible until you imagined them gone. He always left his coffee mug too close to the sink instead of inside it. I always folded throw blankets too neatly, and he always laughed and messed them up again. We had quiet evenings, lazy Sundays, and small plans that made the future feel ordinary. And back then, ordinary felt safe, not boring. Safe, because ordinary meant I wasn't bracing every time my phone lit up. It meant I didn't have to decode tone or talk myself out of discomfort. It meant care showed up naturally enough that I didn't have to ask for proof of it. At least that's what I told myself. Looking back, the shift didn't happen all at once. It never does. People imagine betrayal arriving with one undeniable moment, something loud enough to name immediately. The truth is messier than that. It starts small. A delayed reply, a vague answer, a slight change in rhythm that makes you feel embarrassed for even noticing. Nathan became harder to read over time, not cruel enough to force a confrontation, not distant enough for anyone else to see it, just different in ways that left no clear evidence behind. He still kissed me goodbye, still slept beside me, still asked if I wanted takeout on the way home. But something underneath all of that had thinned out. He answered questions with less detail. He came home later without sounding like he thought I needed to know why. Sometimes he glanced at his phone and tilted the screen away just enough that if I mentioned it, I knew I would sound paranoid. That was the trap. Nothing was concrete enough to accuse, but too many small things were no longer lining up. And when that happens, you start doing damage to yourself before anyone else has to. You stop asking what changed in them and start asking what is wrong with you for noticing. You try to be reasonable, understanding, low maintenance. You tell yourself mature women do not overreact. They do not interrogate. They do not turn every inconsistency into a crisis. So I adjusted. I softened my tone. I let questions die before I asked them. I gave him room he never had to request, because I could already feel the criticism waiting if I didn't. And once you start editing yourself in advance in a relationship, something is already wrong. There was one Friday night I kept thinking about later, after everything ended. He came home later than usual, dropped his keys into the bowl by the door, and didn't look at me right away. I was on the couch with my laptop open, pretending to work and actually watching the clock. "Long night?" I asked. He shrugged off his jacket. "Just out." Just out. Not a lie I could prove. Not an answer either. Just enough to close the door without slamming it. I remember watching him move through the apartment as if nothing in his tone had changed. He opened the fridge, asked if there was sparkling water left, kissed my forehead without really looking at me, and I stayed calm. Because what was I supposed to do? Ask again and be difficult? Push harder and become the bigger problem instead of the feeling that made me ask in the first place? That was what I had started to understand about us. Nathan still expected openness from me, still expected access, still expected steadiness. But when the same thing moved in the other direction, when I wanted clarity from him, it suddenly became pressure. And somehow pressure was always my fault. By the time the night happened, the one that changed everything, I had already been carrying that tension for a while. Quietly, carefully. The way women carry things when they are still trying to save the relationship without admitting how much of themselves they are trimming down to do it. It was late, past midnight. I had showered, put on an oversized t-shirt, cleared a few things off the kitchen counter, answered an email I didn't care about, and checked my phone more times than I wanted to admit. Nathan had gone out earlier and said he might be late. That alone didn't mean much. So I waited the way people wait when they still want to believe something is ordinary. Not suspiciously, just normally. But silence changes texture when it goes on too long. Midnight became one. The apartment grew too still. The hum of the refrigerator, a branch tapping softly outside the window, old pipes settling somewhere in the wall. I stood near the kitchen island with my phone in my hand and felt that strange, cold alertness that comes when your mind is still trying to stay rational, but your body already knows something is off. I told myself not to overthink it. Maybe he lost track of time. Maybe his battery died. Maybe he would walk through the door in 10 minutes, and the whole weight of the night would collapse back into something harmless. But by 3 a.m, I wasn't waiting comfortably anymore. I was waiting carefully. So at exactly 3 a.m., I sent a message. "Where are you?" That was it. No accusation. No passive aggression. No demand. Just 4 words from a woman asking her boyfriend where he was at 3 in the morning. A normal question. The kind of question that should have been answered with a location, or a sentence, or even a careless be home soon. Instead, when Nathan finally replied, he didn't answer it. He reacted to it. His message came in fast and cold. He said I was being clingy, that I needed to give him space, that asking where he was at that hour was controlling. I read it once, then again, not because I didn't understand it, because I did, too clearly. It would have been easier if he had lied, easier if he had sent some sloppy excuse, something careless and human that at least admitted the question deserved an answer. But this was worse. This was framed, as if he had already decided who I was in that conversation before I ever opened my mouth. I wasn't his girlfriend asking a simple question. I was the problem. And in that moment, everything inside me went still. Not shattered. Still, because all at once, the pattern behind us came into focus. The delayed responses, the half answers, the careful way I had been reducing myself to avoid friction. The fact that I had been working so hard to sound reasonable in a relationship where basic concern could be turned into a flaw the second it became inconvenient for him. It was never just about that text. It was about what he needed the text to become. Because if asking where your boyfriend is at 3 a.m. can be labeled controlling, then anything can. Concern becomes pressure. Hurt becomes drama. Boundaries become insecurity. And once someone starts shifting reality that way, there is no right way left for you to speak. I sat down on the edge of the couch and stared at his message. My hands were cold. My mind wasn't. That was the strangest part. I didn't argue. I didn't explain why the question made sense. I didn't defend myself against a distortion that had already told me everything I needed to know. I typed 1 word. Okay. No anger. No follow-up. Just okay. From his side, I'm sure it looked like acceptance. Like he had set a boundary and I had backed down. Like the relationship would continue in whatever damaged shape he had already decided was acceptable. But that was the part he didn't understand. Sometimes acceptance is not patience. Sometimes it is the end. I set my phone face down on the counter and looked around the apartment we had built together. His jacket over the dining chair. My book still open on the coffee table. A glass in the sink. The lamp near the sofa casting the same soft yellow light over a room that suddenly felt less like home and more like evidence. Evidence of how long I had been adjusting myself, how many times I had made myself smaller to keep the peace. How often I had mistaken restraint for maturity, when really it was fear of becoming inconvenient. Around 4 in the morning, I pulled a suitcase out of the closet and started packing. Not everything, only what was mine. Clothes, documents, laptop, chargers, my passport, my tax folder, the jewelry box my grandmother gave me when I was 26. Practical first, sentimental later, because clarity makes you efficient. I folded sweaters with steady hands, paused once in the bedroom and looked around at the dresser, his watch, a shirt I had bought him last winter hanging crooked in the closet. It all looked intimate in the way shared lives do, and yet I felt separate from it already. Not numb, not disconnected, just done. By 5:30, I had the essentials packed. The rest could be sorted later. I wiped down the bathroom counter where my things had been, put my mug in the dishwasher, folded the throw blanket on the couch. Not because he deserved neatness, because I wanted the last evidence of me in that place to look intentional, not chaotic. When the sky started to lighten, I sat on the edge of the bed for a moment and listened. No key in the door, no footsteps, no text, nothing. That should have hurt more than it did. Instead, it confirmed everything. He had framed me as the problem, set his version of reality in place, and walked away expecting it to hold until morning. He thought I would still be there when he got back. Quiet maybe, hurt, probably, but still there. He mistook calm for permanence. A lot of men do. They think the woman who doesn't explode is the woman who will stay. They think restraint is permission. They think composure means endurance. He was wrong. I called a rideshare, left my key on the kitchen counter, and walked out without leaving a note. There was nothing left to explain that he hadn't already explained for me with his own words. The elevator ride down felt absurdly ordinary. Someone got in on the second floor with a gym bag and gave me a polite smile. I smiled back. The lobby smelled faintly like coffee. Outside, the morning air was cool, and the street was just beginning to wake up. My driver loaded my suitcase into the trunk without asking questions. Good. I didn't want any. I gave him the address of a short-term rental I had booked 20 minutes earlier and watched the building disappear through the back window. I expected something cinematic. Grief, panic, a sharp break. What I felt was quieter than that. Relief. Not joy. Not triumph. Relief. As if some tension I had been carrying for months had finally slipped off my shoulders the second I stopped carrying both his comfort and my confusion at the same time. At the rental, I checked in, locked the door behind me, and sat on the edge of a bed that was too firm in a room too anonymous to hold any memory. Beige curtains, generic art, a kitchen with almost nothing in it, and for the first time in a long time, the emptiness felt kind. Around 8, my phone started lighting up. Blocked call. Another. Then another. He was home now. He had seen the closet, the missing things, the key on the counter, maybe the empty bathroom drawer, maybe the silence that no longer looked temporary. Then a message came through from an unknown number. Elena, what is this? Another. Why are your things gone? Then, are you serious right now? I looked at that one the longest. Not because it shook me, because it didn't. There it was again. That same refusal to understand consequence unless it interrupted him personally. Not what happened. Not can we talk. Not I'm sorry. Just shock that my silence had turned into action without waiting for his permission. I put the phone down. A few more messages came after that. Faster. Less controlled. He said I was overreacting. He said I was twisting what he meant. He said I had no right to leave without a conversation. That almost made me laugh. No right. As if I still needed his approval to leave a version of myself he had already made unbearable. I did not reply. By noon, I had changed the passwords that mattered most, contacted work about going remote for a few days, and set a few practical things in motion. Not everything was solved that day, but enough was moving that going back no longer felt easy. That mattered, because the first day after clarity is dangerous, not because the truth gets weaker, because routine starts trying to pull you back into its shape. You remember good mornings, inside jokes, shared meals, the softer version of the person who hurt you. And if you are not careful, nostalgia starts arguing with facts that are already finished. So I kept moving. That afternoon, I booked the one-way flight for later that week. And by the time the confirmation landed in my inbox, I wasn't just a woman who had left an apartment. I was a woman already leaving a life. The flight left just after sunrise. Airports have a way of making everything look more controlled than it is. People moving in straight lines, coffee and paper cups, announcements that sound calm no matter what they're actually carrying. It all feels organized, even when someone's entire life is shifting underneath it. I had one carry-on, one checked bag, and a phone that kept lighting up with a past that didn't want to stay behind. Nathan didn't stop. New numbers, emails, messages through apps I had forgotten we shared. The tone shifted every few hours like he was testing which version of himself would reach me. First confused, then defensive, then softer, then frustrated again. You left instead of talking. You embarrassed me. It wasn't that serious. I didn't mean it like that. You know I've been under pressure. That last one almost made me pause, not because it was convincing, because it was familiar. That pattern, take something that hurt me, reshape it into something that hurt him more, and wait for me to respond like I was the one who needed to fix it. But distance changes things, not the facts, the clarity around them. On the plane, I didn't reply. I didn't explain. I didn't justify leaving. I didn't soften anything to make it easier for him to hear, because I finally understood something I hadn't been able to name before. If someone can turn a simple question into a flaw in you, then no explanation will ever be enough to make them hear you correctly. They're not misunderstanding. They're rearranging. And once you see that, you stop trying to speak inside a structure designed to twist your words. When the plane lifted, my stomach dropped for a second. The kind of physical reaction that feels like your body is catching up to something your mind already decided hours ago. I thought maybe regret would hit then. It didn't. I looked out the window as the city pulled away beneath me and felt something steadier than relief. Permission. Not from him. From myself. The first week in the new place wasn't dramatic. It was practical. Calls. Passwords. Forwarding mail. Updating accounts. Canceling subscriptions. Small, unglamorous decisions that slowly separated my life from his. Leaving someone isn't a single moment. It's a series of small administrative cuts, and each one asks the same quiet question. Are you sure? Sometimes it shows up in stupid ways. A saved address in an app, a shared login, a package still being delivered somewhere you no longer live. You fix one thing, then another, and little by little, the version of your life that included them stops being the default. I kept waiting for something to break me. Not the obvious things. Something small. A receipt. A message. A random memory at the wrong time. But the pain didn't come all at once. It came in flashes. Seeing someone from behind who looked like him and feeling my chest tighten for half a second. reaching for my phone to send something funny and realizing there was no version of us left that I wanted to send it to. Those moments hurt, but they didn't confuse me. And that mattered more than anything, because pain can make you nostalgic. It can blur the edges of what actually happened and highlight the parts that felt easier. The routines, the habits, the version of someone that existed when they weren't being challenged. I remembered all of that. I just didn't forget the rest. That kept me steady. So did routine. Not in a dramatic throw yourself into work way, just structure. I woke up, answered emails, took calls, bought groceries, unpacked slowly, found a coffee shop nearby, learned the quiet sounds of a place that had never known him. Life didn't suddenly become better. It became manageable. That was enough. A week after I left, he sent an email. No accusation in the subject. Just my name, Elena. I didn't open it right away. That alone told me something had changed. The version of me from before would have opened it instantly, already bracing for impact, already preparing a response. This version waited, not out of fear, out of choice. When I finally read it, it was exactly what I expected. Measured, careful, just enough accountability to sound sincere. He said he was shocked, said he didn't realize I felt that way, said calling me controlling had been unfair, said he had been stressed, said we deserved a real conversation before I disappeared. There it was. Disappeared. Even in apology, he needed the framing tilted slightly in his favor. Not before you left, before you disappeared. As if I had done something evasive, unreasonable. As if leaving after being dismissed had been an overreaction instead of a conclusion. There was something else in it too. Not just regret, offense. The quiet frustration of someone who believed they should have had the final say in how things ended. I closed the email. I didn't reply. 2 days later, flowers arrived at the front desk. White lilies. Nathan knew I didn't like lilies. Not dramatically, just enough that I had mentioned it more than once. And there they were. Expensive. Wrong. With a card. Can we please talk? I let out a short breath that almost felt like a laugh. Not because it was funny. Because it was predictable. A gesture that looked thoughtful from a distance but missed the point up close. He wasn't trying to understand me. He was trying to repair the situation without changing the behavior that caused it. I left the flowers downstairs. By the second week, the messages changed again. Less careful. More pointed. You're acting like I cheated. You're exaggerating. Everyone has bad nights. This could have been fixed. That was when the anger came. Not explosive. Clear. Because he still believed the problem was a moment. A single sentence. One bad reaction. Something isolated that could be explained and smoothed over. But it was never just that. It was the pattern underneath it. That a normal question became evidence against me. That my concern had to defend itself. That his behavior never had to. You don't leave because of one message. You leave because one message finally reveals everything else. I blocked that email. Then the next. Then the next. He slowed down eventually. Not all at once. People don't let go of access cleanly when they've grown used to it. First they insist. Then they negotiate. Then they reinterpret. Then, when none of that works, they call your distance unreasonable because they can't call it temporary anymore. At some point in that process, I stopped checking. That was bigger than it sounds. For a while, part of me had still been waiting. For proof. For something final that would confirm, without question, that leaving had been right. But life doesn't always give you that. Sometimes the moment you needed already happened. And everything after is just your mind asking for more evidence because certainty feels unfamiliar after you've spent so long doubting yourself. Once I understood that, it got easier. Not easy. Easier. I signed a longer lease. Bought real dishes. Stopped living out of temporary decisions. Started sleeping through the night again. There's a specific kind of peace that comes when your environment no longer asks you to question your own reactions. It's not dramatic. It's physical. Your shoulders drop. Your thoughts slow down. You stop rehearsing conversations that never needed to happen. I started trusting myself again. That changed everything. Months passed. Then more. The shape of my life shifted in ways that would have sounded small to anyone who hadn't had to rebuild one. I painted the bedroom a color Nathan would have called impractical. Started taking long walks without explaining where I was going. Let silence exist without needing to fill it. The version of me who once stared at a 3 a.m. text and wondered if she was overreacting would recognize my life by its facts. But not by its feeling. That woman had been careful all the time. This one wasn't. 3 years later, I saw him again. It happened in a grocery store a few blocks from my office. No build-up. No warning. I was standing in the produce section, holding 2 avocados, trying to decide if either of them would actually be ready before the weekend. And then I heard my name. Elena? Some voices don't fade. They stay somewhere physical. I knew it was Nathan before I turned around. He looked older. Not dramatically. Just real. a little more tired around the eyes. Better jacket, different haircut. The same way of standing like the moment in front of him would eventually arrange itself in his favor. For a second, neither of us spoke. I set the avocados back. Hi, Nathan. There was surprise in his face, then something warmer. Relief, maybe. I can't believe it's you, he said. I can. That made him pause. Cities are smaller than people think. Lives overlap. Things you leave behind don't always stay gone in a straight line. He gave a short laugh, unsure. I've been looking for you. Of course he had. I'm not surprised. For the first time, he looked slightly off balance. I found your city through an old coworker. Then I saw your name online. One sentence. That was all it needed to make sense. I nodded. And now you have. He smiled, too hopeful too quickly. I've wanted to talk to you. I believe that. Not because it meant anything had changed. Because unfinished endings bother people who expect to be understood. I picked up my basket. I'm sure you have. He shifted slightly, trying to hold the moment in place. Do you have a minute? I looked at him. Really looked. And the strangest thing wasn't anger, or nerves, or temptation. It was distance. Clean. Complete. The kind that only exists when someone who once had the power to unsettle you no longer does. Yes, I said. 1 minute. He exhaled, like that 1 minute meant more than it should have. Like he had been waiting for an opening and wasn't sure how quickly it might close again. I didn't think I'd actually run into you like this, he said. You didn't, I replied. You looked for me. A small correction. But it mattered. He nodded, adjusting his grip on the basket. Yeah, I did. There was a pause. Not awkward. Measured. Like he was deciding which version of this conversation he wanted to have. I owe you an apology, he said finally. I didn't react. I didn't stop him either. I handled things badly, he continued. That night, I shouldn't have said what I said. I've thought about it a lot. I held his gaze. He was more careful now, slower, choosing words the way people do when they want to be understood. I didn't realize how much it affected you, he added. I thought it was just one argument. There it was, still, even after everything, still reduced to a moment. I know, I said. That seemed to catch him off guard. You know? I know you thought that. Another pause. He shifted his weight slightly. It wasn't just that I didn't care. I was under a lot of pressure back then. Work was a mess. I wasn't sleeping much, and I reacted badly. That's on me. It sounded reasonable. Clean. Almost convincing, if you didn't know what sat underneath it. I've changed since then, he added. I've worked on that, on how I communicate, on not shutting people down like that. I let him finish. Not because I needed the explanation. Because I wanted him to hear it all the way through himself. And I've wanted to talk to you, he said again, softer this time, to actually fix things, or at least understand what happened. I nodded once. Then I answered. You called me controlling for asking where you were at 3 a.m. He opened his mouth slightly, like he was about to respond, but I continued before he could. You didn't answer the question. You turned it into a flaw in me. His expression tightened. I said that was wrong, he said. I'm not defending it. I know, I said. You're explaining it. That landed. Not harsh. Just precise. I'm trying to take responsibility, he said, a little more firmly now. For the sentence, I replied. Another pause. This one longer, more uncomfortable, because we were no longer talking about the same thing. I didn't cheat on you, he said. I almost smiled. I didn't leave because I thought you did. That wasn't the point. He frowned slightly. Then why did you leave like that? There it was. The question he had been carrying for 3 years. Not why did things break? Why did you leave without giving me a chance to manage how they broke? I didn't leave suddenly, I said. His brow furrowed. It felt sudden. It felt sudden to you, I corrected. Because from his perspective, it was. From mine, it wasn't. It wasn't one night, I continued. It was a pattern. He didn't interrupt this time. Small things, I said. The way you stopped answering questions directly. The way I started editing myself before I spoke. The way basic concern kept getting reframed into something I had to defend. He looked at me, trying to track it. I didn't see it that way, he said. I know, I replied. That didn't change anything. He ran a hand through his hair, slower now. If you had told me... I did. He stopped. Not dramatically. Just enough. You didn't hear it, I said. Because that was the truth. Not cruel. Not exaggerated. Just accurate. I wasn't trying to ignore you, he said. I know. Another quiet shift. Because intent wasn't the issue. Impact was. I just think, he started, then paused, choosing his words again. I think we could have fixed it if we had talked it through properly. There it was again. That belief. That everything was still salvageable if only the conversation had happened on his terms. I did talk to you, I said. You didn't like what I said. His jaw tightened slightly. That's not fair, he said. It is, I replied, calm. Because you didn't respond to what I asked. You responded to what you needed it to mean. He looked away for a second, then back. I've changed, he said again. I believed that he believed that. That was the complicated part. People do change, sometimes, in parts. But change after consequence doesn't rewrite what the absence of it costs someone else. That might be true, I said. There was a flicker of relief in his expression, but it didn't last. But it doesn't change anything for me, I finished. That settled between us. Final. Not harsh. Not emotional. Just done. He exhaled slowly. So that's it? Yes. No hesitation. No softening. No extra explanation. Just yes. He looked at me for a long second, like he was waiting for something else to follow. A reconsideration. A question. An opening. There wasn't one. I thought maybe. He started, then stopped. I know, I said. Because I did. He had thought time would make the ending negotiable. That distance would turn certainty into curiosity. That if he found me again, there would still be something left to work with. There's nothing to fix, I said. Not because nothing had gone wrong. Because what had gone wrong had already ended. He nodded once, slowly. Not agreement. Recognition. That this version of me wasn't available to the version of him standing in front of me. I'm glad you're doing well, he said. It sounded real. I am, I replied. And I was. That was the simplest part of the whole conversation. He shifted his basket again, like he wasn't sure what to do with his hands now that there was nothing left to hold on to in the moment. I guess I just needed to say that, he said. I know. Closure. That was what he had been looking for. Not the kind that comes from understanding. The kind that comes from being heard. From having the last version of the story acknowledged. But closure doesn't always come from the other person. Sometimes it comes from realizing you don't need anything else from them at all. I have to go, I said. Not abruptly, just accurately. He nodded. Yeah, of course. I picked up my basket, walked past him, didn't look back. Not because I was trying to prove anything, because there was nothing left to check. At the register, I placed the avocados on the counter. The cashier scanned them without looking up. I paid, took the receipt, and stepped back out into the afternoon light like it was any other day. And that was the point. There was a time when one message at 3 a.m. could have unraveled me, when one word from him could shift the way I saw myself, when silence felt like something I had to fill. Now it didn't. Now it was just space. Clean. Undisturbed. Mine.